Welcome to today's Explainer. Today, we're unpacking what is absolutely one of the most incredible, yet somehow totally overshadowed achievements in the entire history of English football.
So let's just dive right in with a pretty simple question. Why on earth does everyone remember the 2004 Arsenal squad, but almost completely forget the team that nearly pulled off the exact same feat 13 years earlier? And get this, they did it under way more chaotic circumstances. We're talking a massive pitch brawl, unprecedented point deductions, and their legendary captain literally being sent to prison mid-season. This is the wild story of Arsenal's 1991 Almost Invincibles, a team that just absolutely refused to break.
Section 1. The Almost Invincibles. To really get this, we've got to go back to the start of the 1990 to 1991 First Division season, where George Graham's defensively rock-solid Arsenal side came out of the gates looking, well, unbeatable.
They cruised through their first 9 games without a single defeat. I mean, they were a brick wall. And this incredible run perfectly set the stage for a massive, high-stakes clash with Manchester United in late October. Now, United, managed by Alex Ferguson, were always fierce, and these matchups were already notorious for being highly combustible. So both teams marched onto the pitch at Old Trafford geared up for an absolute battle. But honestly, no one could have predicted just how explosive things were going to get.
Part 2, Brawl at Old Trafford. Because that specific match didn't just test their football skills, it sparked an infamous event that would alter the trajectory of their entire season and cement a bitter, decades-long rivalry.
Let's actually look at the timeline here, because the way this builds into pure chaos is wild. So Arsenal takes the lead right before halftime thanks to Anders Limpar. The tension is really bubbling. Then, just past the hour mark, Nigel Winterburn goes in for a fierce, lunging tackle on Dennis Irwin, while Irwin and his teammate Brian McClare immediately retaliate. Seconds later, Paul Ince shoves Limpar straight over the advertising hoardings. And then, absolute mayhem. 21 players pile into a massive frantic brawl. And the craziest part? That whole melee lasted no more than 20 seconds.
The immediate aftermath on the pitch was just as baffling. Despite almost every single outfield player throwing down, and the referee, Keith Hackett, clearly struggling to keep any sort of control, he only ended up booking 2 players, both from Arsenal, Limpar and Winterburn. 0 Manchester United players were booked for the incident during the game. Oh, and here's a funny little detail. Arsenal's goalkeeper, David Seaman, was literally the only player out of all 22 who stayed completely out of it. He just stood back and watched from afar as his team eventually ground out a gritty 1-0 win.
Moving on to Section 3, an unprecedented punishment. Because that victory, that was just the start of the drama. The media frenzy was absolute, and the Football Association decided they needed to make a drastic example out of the clubs to stamp this behavior out.
And this perfectly illustrates the perceived injustice that completely fueled Arsenal for the rest of the year. The FA handed out massive £50,000 fines to both clubs, but then they went a step further. Because of a previous fighting charge against Norwich a year earlier, Arsenal got slapped with a 2-point deduction in the league, while United only lost 1. To this day, it is still the only time in English league history that a team has been docked points purely for player misconduct.
So you're probably wondering, how did manager George Graham handle this in the dressing room? You'd expect a team to maybe unravel or play the victim, but Graham, he completely ignored the media hysteria. In his first meeting with the squad after the tribunal decision, he calmly looked at his players and told them to use that perceived injustice as fuel. His message was incredibly simple. There's one way to handle it, just keep winning matches. He demanded they keep their minds strictly on the football.
Section 4. Overcoming major setbacks. But you know, the universe wasn't quite done testing this squad. Just as they were regaining their focus, the winter of 1990 hit them with a tidal wave of adversity.
Talk about a brutal stretch. First, they have to swallow that unprecedented points deduction. Then, in late November, they get absolutely embarrassed at home, losing 6-2 to Manchester United in the League Cup with a young Lee Sharp scoring a hat-trick against their supposedly unbreakable defense. And if that wasn't enough, just weeks later, they suffered the ultimate blow when their legendary captain was sent to jail.
Yep, on December 19, 1990, Tony Adams was sentenced to prison for drink driving offenses. Think about that for a second. Losing your captain, your defensive anchor, the absolute heart of the team, just 6 days before Christmas, that would have completely derailed any normal team's title hopes.
But they didn't crumble. Instead, the team and the fans developed this impenetrable, us-against-the-world siege mentality. They stuck by their captain, and the supporters actually adopted a highly defiant chant as their rallying cry for the rest of the season. "You can stick your 2 points up your ass." They sang it at every single ground. They turned a punishment into a badge of honor, and it actually galvanized the squad to rattle off 3 straight wins right after Adams went away.
Now, their incredible, unbeaten streak was finally snapped in early February. It happened during a gloomy away match against Chelsea at a pre-modernized Stamford Bridge. But what's truly spectacular here is that this single loss would miraculously be their one and only stumble of the entire campaign. Which brings us to Section 5, Champions Against All Odds. With Adams eventually returning from prison to reclaim the captain's armband, the Arsenal juggernaut proved absolutely unstoppable down the stretch.
And it led to this wonderfully anticlimactic twist to a highly dramatic season. They officially won the league without even playing a match that day. Thanks to title rivals Liverpool dropping points against Nottingham Forest in the afternoon, Arsenal were crowned champions before they even kicked a ball for their evening match against Manchester United. And get this, the United players actually gave them a guard of honor onto the pitch.
But don't worry, they made sure to give the fans a proper celebration on the final day of the season. They took a glorious victory lap in the sunshine at Highbury, absolutely thrashing Coventry City 6-1. Anders Limpar brought the house down with a brilliant hat trick, capping off a truly unforgettable year.
I want you to just take a second and look at this number, 1, because this is really what you should take away from this entire explainer. 1 single loss across an entire 38-game season. For a squad that dealt with everything they did, to only be bested a single time, it's just a massive monument to their character.
When you view their final staggering statistics, winning 24 games, scoring 74 goals, it's phenomenal. But look closer. They conceded only 18 goals all year. 18! And they did that despite losing their captain to a prison sentence for months. To put that into perspective, it proves this was an absolute masterclass in resilience, mental toughness, and defensive organization engineered by George Graham.
So it leaves us with a fascinating final thought to ponder. Considering the massive 21-man brawls, the unprecedented point deductions, and losing their captain to prison mid-season, is this 1991 title run actually more impressive than going totally unbeaten? It's a fantastic debate, and it really highlights the sheer willpower of the human spirit in sports. Thank you so much for joining me to explore this incredible slice of football history, and I'll catch you on the next explainer.